I think it's going to help Canada create. It's going to create better jobs for us. Like, I mean, we have to be. Like, I mean, we're not worried about losing our jobs to Mexico, because I find that we're better educated, so we're not going to worry about losing our high technical jobs. But down the road, we're going to have to be better educated in the fact that we have to keep up with Mexico because they're going to become more educated. So I think education is the most important part. I don't think we're going to lose any jobs over it. I think it only helps us.
I'd like to think it's going to help, but I really don't think it's going to. I think that you have such a big market in the States that we're not going to be able to compete with that kind of business. In Mexico, too, I mean, they're not far behind us economically, and technologically they aren't either, so.
Welcome to Point of View, the program that lets you be part of the discussion. With this week's topic and guests, here's your host, Kelley McGuire.
Good evening and welcome to another edition of Point of View. Tonight's topic is about the North American Free Trade Agreement. We have with us this evening Gordon Wilden, who is the Riverview MLA and the core finance critic. As well, we have Ken McLeod, who is the president of the Fredericton Chamber of Commerce.
Good evening, Kelley.
What is free trade as a concept?
Well, it's essentially it's just that, free trade. It's the ability for one country and the businesses in each country to trade with each other with a minimum of interference from tariffs and other government programs that tend to limit the ability of businesses to trade. And I think right now in the world, you're seeing a great movement towards freer trade between countries and the creation of free trade blocs, if you will, such as the European Community. The North American Free Trade Agreement is an example of one of those blocks. As well, there's negotiations underway right now on what's called the General Agreement on Tariff and Trade, called GATT, which is an international movement towards reducing the tariffs between countries around the world. And the idea being that by reducing the amount of interference from tariffs and duties and things like that, it allows greater economic development amongst the countries that are party to the agreements, and allows businesses which have the competitive advantage to use those and prosper, and therefore improve the economies of the countries that are involved.
Right. Do you agree with his definition of free trade?
That is a very good description. The economic activity carried on within the country is fine and provides jobs, but it doesn't create wealth for the country. The only way you can create wealth is to deal with other countries. And any kind of impediment to trade makes it more expensive, whether it's adding on tariffs or special levels of quality or whatever. That can affect the trade, and that makes things more expensive. The more expensive things get, the less you trade. And really, it's as simple as that.
Okay, when was the NAFTA implemented?
NAFTA is just implemented as of the 1st of January this year.
Okay, and what benefit to Canada specifically?
Well, in Canada, we have access to the American market, which is one of the largest markets in the world, and now under NAFTA we have access to the Mexican market as well, which provides immense opportunity for our businesses to export their goods and improve, and because they have access to these markets, they can grow and produce more goods, and that will improve their efficiency. And you know, I just see it as a win-win situation for both countries. And of course, when businesses succeed and improve, they hire people, create jobs, and improve the economy of the country. And it's not going to happen overnight. You're not going to see a major boom in business, but it's going to happen over time. And I think it's just going to benefit Canadians as a whole.
Okay, Mr. Wilden, do you see free trade as a win-win situation? Is it that cut and dry that we will benefit equally?
It's win-win, yes, but it's win-win over a long time, over a long period. It's going to take a good many years before all the various articles of the agreements are in place and operative. In the meantime, there are a lot of adjustments that are going to take place. With the things which have been protected by various agreements or various trade treaties, Now with those removed, they are going to be, certainly under the GATT, they're going to be protected through very high tariffs. But these tariffs are going to be reduced over the next 6 years. So an industry now which is protected with tariffs is going to lose that protection over the next 6 years. Now we have 6 years then to learn to live and become competitive with the other countries who have signed the agreements and on a free trade basis. And that's competing head to head with no advantage. This is what we have to learn to do.
So do you agree that there would be, this is competition head to head with no advantage? What about the difference in minimum wage among the countries now?
There are
It seems
things
to me
we can do in this country which we can do better than they can do in other countries. There are things which they can do in other countries better than we can do here. And this is where one country can get an advantage in the trade over the other. But we should not be doing things in this country which another country can do better. And this is what we've tried to do in the past. We've tried to protect an industry or create an industry here and protect it and allow it to grow in a confined, protected area through protective tariffs or trade barriers. Now we're going to lose that.
Okay, now is it win-win for the big guy, the corporations, or is it the little guy as well?
Well, I think if you, you know, it's going to provide advantages for smaller businesses as well, particularly ones that have a good product and a good idea that you know, hasn't been developed anywhere else. And there are a number of those businesses, even right in New Brunswick, that will be able to take advantage of the free trade agreements.
And start a small business here in New Brunswick?
Start a small business. We're right next door to the American border.
Right.
Our location in New Brunswick is excellent for trying to...
Why would they not start the same small business in Holton or somewhere in Maine and hire people for much lower than they're paid here minimum wage?
There are numerous advantages to living in New Brunswick. It's an excellent province to live in. There's our social programs provide an advantage for people that are living here, which would attract businesses here because their employees would be happy and therefore better able to work. As well, we do have the resources here. We have technology. We have our university, and we have created a base of support for businesses. And a good example is the telecommunications business. We've had numerous companies locate their telecommunications, their phone centers in New Brunswick because they feel that New Brunswick has advantages over the U.S. And our phone rates, New Brunswick has a lower tax in terms of for telecommunications and things like that will attract businesses. So by locating in New Brunswick, they have those advantages, and they're right next door to their largest customer, which is the United States.
Okay, but doesn't it all come down to dollars and cents? I mean, the bottom line of a business is money.
Yes.
Forget the scenery of a province, forget, you know, happy employees. Maine has a high unemployment rate. And if I owned a business, for example, we'll say the Campbell Soup Company, wouldn't it be cheaper and easier for them to move their outfit across the border and hire people at that much less cost? I mean, doesn't it come down to a financial advantage for businesses to move out of Canada? Jobs are lost. I'm just playing devil's advocate here, and I
certainly. There are some things that we do in Canada better than they do in the United States. One big thing are all our primary industries and our resource-based industries. We have resources, all kinds of resources, water, trees, mines, what have you. The other thing we have here is extremely good social programs, health, education, and the safety nets. And these are much better than they are in the United States, and I don't know how they compare with Mexico. I'm not familiar with it down there.
Aren't our social programs seen as subsidies by the U.S.? Seen as, you know...
But they're protected right now, and there's no threat to our social programs under the agreements. And in fact, right now the U.S. is looking at our health care and saying we should have the same sort of thing in the States. So I think they see that as an advantage that Canada has, and they're looking to try and build up their social programs to meet them.
This is an advantage for a company to locate in Canada because the employees will be happier and more secure and this type of thing than they would be in the United States where they have to pay for it.
Kelley, if I could just get back to a point you talked about earlier in terms of wouldn't it be better to go to a location with lower wages? That's not the only consideration. Wages are obviously a big component of a company's expenses, but you have to realize not all businesses have large labor-intensive products that they're trying to produce.
Right.
And some of them need a location where they've got access to resources, which, as Gordon mentioned, we've got in Canada, access to information and technology, a lot of which we have in Canada that isn't available in the States. And in Fredericton particularly, we've developed knowledge-based industries that tend to feed off each other. And it's to their advantage to locate here because they can pool their resources and therefore generate more business amongst themselves and export that business. So another example in terms of location, it seems kind of bizarre, but in Nova Scotia there's one of the leading manufacturers of ambulances, and they're exporting all around the world. So, and they see being in Nova Scotia as being an advantage. So, there's reasons for locating everywhere, and just looking at wages is not the only reason for a business locating in a particular country or province.
Right. It seems now I really don't know a whole lot about the North American Free Trade Agreement. The first thing that comes to mind is money and wages, and that it would be cheaper for a business to relocate across the border. Jobs would be lost in Canada. Jobs would be gained in America, in the States. It also seems that the States could come to Canada and pull our resources out of here, and thus and bring them back there. And I see an imbalance here. That they could tap into Canadian resources. It seems that I see an imbalance.
Yeah. Any product you're producing takes labor, material, and overhead. We have the material. Our overhead, thinking things like the various things that help you to do business, the technology, the information highway, all this type of thing, plus the education level of the employees. This is cheaper and more accessible and better, more accessible here. The actual labor dollar may be more expensive here, but you're getting a different quality labor. And we are able to turn out better quality products in a lot of cases. But if you get an industry or you're producing something which is very labor intensive and it doesn't take a very sophisticated labor force, then possibly we wouldn't be able to compete with what Mexico can do. And it's this type of trade-off. Some industries will be much better in Canada, some would be better in Mexico, some will be better in the United States. And these are the adjustments that are going to take place as the effects of NAFTA finally work through the system.
So it's probably too soon yet to really see whether there has been a benefit to...
It's much too soon. As we said earlier, it's going to be a long-term process.
Right.
And and it's not going to be easy, and there will be businesses in Canada that will be hurt, just as there will be businesses in the States that have been hurt. But I think what you're going to see is a shifting in the balance, and you're going to see some businesses locating in Canada, other businesses locating in the States, and it may not look the same as it does now, but it'll be a more efficient process, and because businesses are more efficient, they'll be more profitable, and it'll benefit both countries.
Okay, how did Canada first become involved with NAFTA?
Well, I think that would probably go back to the dealings with the United States under the Free Trade Agreement, the bilateral Free Trade Agreement that we had with the States, but that was only on orders over $25,000, I believe. I forget the details of it now. I think that was the basement. When business over that amount, we could deal on a free trade basis with the United States.
If I may just interject, actually the Canadian history with trade with the United States goes back a long way, and actually I think the Free Trade Agreement found its roots in the original auto pacts, which allowed auto manufacturers to import and export their parts and their vehicles between Canada and the United States with absolutely no tariffs whatsoever. And those programs have been continued under the Free Trade Agreement and under NAFTA.
And they've been extended to other countries too.
That's right. And,
which they found difficult to swallow.
But I think we've had a tremendous benefit from the Auto Pact, and in a sense, the free trade agreement and NAFTA are just extending the benefits of those types of agreements to a broader range of goods and services. So,
Okay, when Canada first became involved with NAFTA, how were the people consulted about this, or were they consulted?
I think that the process for NAFTA was a little different than under the free trade agreement. Canada was negotiating the free trade agreement with the United States, and in the middle of that whole process there was an election, and that election was won, I guess for a primary reason, was on the free trade agreement. And so the negotiations were concluded on the free trade agreement, and it was implemented. And what happened after that was that Mexico decided they wanted a similar arrangement with the United States. And at that point, Canada felt that we couldn't be excluded from that type of negotiation and those arrangements. And we got involved with the process of the negotiations regarding NAFTA, so that we could make sure that we protected what we gained under free trade, and possibly even extend those benefits to other areas. So,
without Canada being involved in the agreement between Mexico and the United States, it left the door open for the possibility of trade coming in from Mexico into the United States, and then from the United States into Canada. We'd still be competing with Mexico, but have no control over the agreements on the starting of it.
I see. Okay, here's what you had to say when we asked you, what do you know about the North American Free Trade Agreement?
It seems like something like the economic community in Europe, and bringing the economies together in the United States, Mexico, and Canada. Somehow, I guess that's about it.
Currently, what I know is that three countries that are involved are Canada, U.S., and Mexico, and they're involved under the influence of, I guess, global marketing, which is necessary in our economy right now, seeing that everything's very harsh and very slow at the moment. So we're looking to spread our resources all over the world.
I know that we were supposed to be able to go back and forth in the States, I thought, without having to pay a whole bunch of taxes. And I know now I can bring back about $10 across the border before I get stopped for taxes. We didn't know that we were going to have to pay GST and PSD on top of it at the border. And that's mostly, I thought we were supposed to be able to go back and forth without having to pay, but I guess it's mostly for the bigger companies or something.
The theory is that it's supposed to open the market so that we can trade more of our goods with the United States and vice versa.
Well, basically it was a 10-year agreement where the duties would slowly come down on products. Like, for instance, now you can bring new cars across where you couldn't before.
It is devised to make trade between Canada and Mexico, and Canada and the United States and Mexico work better. But as with most things that Canada gets into, it'll probably work out that America gains the most.
Trade barriers are down between both Mexico, Canada, and the United States. But mostly what I've heard is really negative, nothing really positive. I heard that the Mexicans are going to get the jobs. Canada is selling out to the United States is selling out to Mexico.
NAFTA, it's called NAFTA. It's between Mexico, the United States, and Canada. And I don't think it's been approved yet. It hasn't come into law yet, I don't think.
Interesting. Don't wait till the end of the show to call in. The phone number is 450-0337. We want your opinion. Okay, what are the disadvantages? Are there any disadvantages to New Brunswick specifically with the North American Free Trade Agreement?
Well, I think we commented earlier, it's going to be a long process, and it's not necessarily going to be an easy one for some businesses. Businesses that have traditionally been protected under Canada's tariffs and supply management programs may face periods of transition and may even be forced out of business. But I think what you're going to see is those businesses being replaced by other businesses which will be able to take advantage of the free trade and the lower tariffs and export their products to the United States. And obviously when businesses close, and that's going to put some people out of work, and it's going to be difficult for those people to transfer their skills and learn new skills to deal or to be able to benefit the other new businesses that start. And during that transition phase, it is going to be difficult for a lot of people.
In an already difficult employment situation.
Yes, which is, it's unfortunate that during this time that there's been a worldwide recession, and that's had a negative impact on the economy and on businesses. And it's probably not the best time for that to happen, but I think we have to deal with that given that it's here. So, you know, that just adds to any transition problems that some businesses and some people might have. But as we say, in the long run, the benefits are going to far outweigh the disadvantages. How long
of a run are you talking about?
It's difficult to say. The tariffs themselves are being reduced over a 10-year period, and it's going to take till the end of the 10 years before some businesses will actually be affected by the NAFTA and the free trade agreement. And so it may take a couple of years after that before they've fully implemented new procedures or policies or new programs to deal with free trade, or be forced out of business.
Seems like a very unsafe time for this kind of a disadvantage.
Well, I think you have to look at what business you're in, and you know, a lot of business actually, the writing was on the wall long before free trade existed or long before NAFTA existed, and I don't think they would have survived in the world economy that we have today. So if there's any impact on those businesses, it would just be to accelerate their eventual demise or their movement to the United States. You know, it was designed, the free trade agreements were designed to be gradual and implement their change over a period of time so that you wouldn't have a massive impact on the economy all at once. And there are also emergency provisions in there which allow the governments to sort of halt the progression of free trade agreements in NAFTA if they see it's going to have a major impact on a particular industry.
Okay, Mr. Wilden, do you have any comments on?
Yeah, there are other very negative provisions in both in GAFTA and in NAFTA, which are articles which have been put there for specific reasons to control or completely eliminate difficulties with free trade. One which has had an effect on New Brunswick immediately already was the GATT business, where you're not allowed to have barriers.
Supply management programs.
No, the barriers in selling beer across provincial lines. You couldn't sell in the other province unless you had a manufacturing plant there. And when the GATT agreement was signed, somebody in the United States, I understand, complained to the International Tribunal, and they ruled that these embargoes have got to go. As soon as they were done, then the brewery in St. John closed down, because this was Olin's Brewery from Halifax. This was a subsidiary plant that enabled Olin's Brewery to be sold in New Brunswick on the same basis as local beer. And the same thing with the Moosehead Brewery in Halifax. They both closed down and ceased operations now because that regulation no longer applies. They've laid the people off, but the home breweries are producing the amount which was produced at the subsidiary brewery, if you like. Now we have a similar thing. There's one under NAFTA which can cause us all kinds of trouble in New Brunswick here, is the business that Crown corporations under NAFTA will not be allowed to be used as economic development instruments in the province. And also Crown corporations will not be allowed to have a monopoly position with the government. They can, providing it is expressed and registered with the tribunal before somebody puts in a complaint. But if somebody puts in a complaint, then the tribunal will rule. And there is no appeal to a ruling of this tribunal. The difficulty that we have here is that NB Coal is the only supplier of coal to NB Power. And if somebody complains offshore of this arrangement, then NB Power could be required to tender for its coal supply on the open market. Right. And the coal out of Minto is running between $60 and $65 a ton, and the open market price is just under 40. And this would end the coal business in New Brunswick.
Right.
Now we can protect ourselves against it by registering this situation with the tribunal, but it's got to be done. We've been trying to get the provincial government to do this since last year.
What is this tribunal made up of?
This is almost like a court set up. It's actually started with GATT, and I believe it has representatives of all the country. or representatives appointed by all the countries, and they are there to rule on any disagreements that come up between any of the signatories to the agreement. And their ruling is unappealable. Once it's in, it's in.
So they could very well decide that NB Power can buy their coal
Just like
elsewhere.
our breweries went down the drain. So the same thing could happen to NB Coal. Now, there is an agreement. We tried to get a motion through the House last year at this time to ask the government to go ahead and make this registration with the tribunal. And they feel that the interpretation that they feel of that particular article in the Act, that they have lots of time and it's not really necessary to do it now. If myself, I wouldn't take the chance. This is what the article says, I would do it. Never mind your interpretation. Lawyers, all lawyers can, every lawyer can come up with a different point of view on a particular
That's
item.
right. Yeah. Now, okay, now I'm confused.
Good.
I heard
It's a
both of you
confusing
tell
topic.
me. Yeah, I heard both of you tell me a few minutes ago that the North American Free Trade Agreement is a good thing.
Yes.
Now I've heard horror stories about what the North American Free Trade Agreement can do, especially to New Brunswick.
To specific industries or in specific cases?
I think we talked about
The few specific cases, given the size and population of New Brunswick, could have quite an impact, though. Don't
yes.
you think?
Definitely.
we talked earlier about transitions between businesses and making businesses more efficient and being able to compete with this increased competitiveness. And there's no question it is going to affect some businesses, and as I said before, they will be forced out of business. I think what's happened in the brewing industry is actually something that the provinces, or at least New Brunswick, has been trying to aggressively promote over the years, because of our Moosehead breweries in St. John has been trying to get into the U.S. market, but has been impeded by tariffs and restrictions. And with the free trade agreements, they now have a chance to try and compete with the other breweries in the U.S.
And actually, they went into the United States before they were able to sell in other provinces in Canada.
Is that
because of this requirement that you have to have a brewery in the province.
And what's happening with the breweries is that it's obviously more efficient for them to have one large brewery and produce their beer there and then ship it to the other locations where they're selling it, rather than to have numerous breweries all over the country and produce beer much less efficient. And as we said before, it's unfortunate that it's going to mean a shifting of the jobs, and some people are going to find themselves out of work. But hopefully new businesses will be able to start up and take advantage of the free trade agreements and replace those jobs that were lost. And I think that's hopefully that's what's happening in the brewing industry. And we're looking at within Canada, those interprovincial trade barriers that Gordon was talking about are being eliminated, and Moosehead will be able to sell its beer across Canada and not be restricted to New Brunswick or Nova Scotia or one particular province.
And it will be able to do it without having to have a brewery in each province. That's better for the brewery, cheaper, more profit, more competitive. That's good.
Okay,
It's
but
hard
this
on the
is long
employees.
term. We're talking long term here.
Yes, that's right.
In a time where people need jobs now. I just think that when it comes down to an adult person trying to maybe feed a family and make a mortgage payment, they don't want to hear long term. They want a job and they want it now. They don't want to lose their job and they don't want to lose their business. This seems, I hear you saying that the North American Free Trade Agreement is a good thing. I just wonder if people are going to be able to see this as a good thing when it may be, as you say, a good thing long term, but they're losing their jobs now, or else they don't have a job now and they need one, or their business is falling apart because of it. Yeah.
We have a difficult situation. Our income assistance in the province of New Brunswick today is costing, the figure came out in the House the other night. I think it's $3,894 per person is what it's costing us. Each one of us has to pay that much taxes for one item, income assistance. That's not counting our health or education or interest on the provincial debt. This is a bad situation, and the one reason we're in it is because there are so many people in this province who are on income assistance. I think the caseload is up around 75 to 80,000 people.
Okay, but if jobs are lost and businesses fail, for the short term, then people will be paying that much more.
Here's the other side of it, is that NAFTA is good because once NAFTA is on the go, and as it gets on the go, manufactured items mostly will become cheaper, or any movement across the borders of goods will become cheaper. Trade will increase. If things are cheaper, people buy more, and this will create more jobs, and that's fine. Right now, it is very difficult. What we have to do is be able to produce better quality and more of it, more production per person, in order to try and get as many goods out. We have to pick industries that we can compete with in the open market.
I think it's very dangerous to take a short-term view of anything like this, because I think the long-term health of a country and the long-term benefit of a country should be looked at and should be dealt with. We don't want to make a decision now and then pay for it later. And I think we would pay much more dearly later if we didn't implement the free trade agreement and didn't participate in the world movement towards free trade. And it is a movement. It's not just Canada and the US and Mexico. It's happening all over the world. And if we don't participate in it, we're going to be left out. And in the long run, Canada could end up being a third world country because of that. And I agree with you. There's going to be a lot of hardship for a lot of people in the short term, but I think we would pay for it otherwise. And a good comparison for paying for things later is the current fiscal deficits that the governments are running right now. We're paying for excesses that governments spent years ago.
25 years ago.
Well, it's been happening for a long time.
Yeah, that's right.
So, and we've got to pay for that now. Somebody's got to pay for it. And so the free trade's a good example of making a decision now that will benefit us in the future rather than the other way around.
The one difficulty and one thing that makes it confuses the issue more is we not only have the free trade agreement with the United States, we have NAFTA, which is a North American Free Trade Association, right. Mexico, United States, and Canada. We also have GATT, which has, I think, 107 nations around the world, and that's a lot of countries.
Just to interrupt you for a second, what did you say GATT?
GATT, General Agreement on Tariffs and Trade. And this is a very similar thing, which is also eliminating trade barriers and reducing them all over the place. It was actually under the GATT agreement that we had trouble with the breweries because of this business. Now, the one that would affect NB Coal would be the NAFTA business on the Crown corporations. So we've got a whole lot of changes on the go right now.
Okay, how do you think NAFTA would help or hurt Canada? Here's what you had to say.
A lot of things that could help and a lot of things that could hurt. Now, if you're talking about small businesses, it hurts. Big industry, it helps. But what it's also done is it opens up the Canadian borders, like the provincial borders. So that's started as well.
I think it'll help us in the long run, but I'm not too sure about it right now.
Okay.
And I think the Americans will get the best deal out of it anyway.
I don't know. I don't think that NAFTA itself will have as much effect as the original free trade agreement between Canada and the States did. I think there'll be more of an effect on the southern states.
I think in some ways it'll help, but it's certainly going to hurt some people. But I think it will be of some benefit. It's just, I think what it'll do is shift around the emphasis on some aspects of our economy. I think like some industries, big industries will probably go to Mexico where it's cheaper anyway, but then again, it might make the Mexican wages come up and their standard of living rise. So I think it'll even out in the end.
I think it'll hurt Canada, because there's a very cheap labor market in Mexico, and I think a lot of companies are going to move down there or move their production down there, and I think it'll probably hurt Canada in the long run.
It'll definitely hurt people. It'll help it'll hurt small business, but later down the line, it'll help Canada as a whole. Because I think if you don't comply with NAFTA or the United States, you tend to get isolated and forgotten about. So if you don't get into the realm or follow the trends of the future, you might be lost in the shuffle later on.
I don't think it really makes much difference with or without it, personally. For the little people, I don't know about the bigger companies, but I know for us it doesn't make much difference. We still get as much across the board as we did before, I guess. But
I think it's going to change Canada. From a manufacturing standpoint, it's obviously difficult for us to compete with the lower wages in the United States. From a marketing standpoint, it's obviously nice to have access to 280 million people.
Oh, probably help in the long run, especially with our low dollar.
In theory, it should help, but then so did the first trade agreement. In theory, was supposed to help, but it hasn't. And the state that the country is in just now, we shouldn't risk anything economically.
I mean, I've heard that it's going to be a lot of lumber and water, which we seem to have more of than they do, but if we give it all away, then we won't have any left. That's basically what so in that way it would be bad.
I would say it will hurt for the next maybe couple of years, but then things will even off because, you know, you look at Mexico mostly. Now the salaries are very low, but, you know, once they hear about what's happening in Canada, what's happening in the States, it's like Japan is the same way. Taiwan is getting to be the same way. So, you know, the wages will go up and things will even off and we'll benefit from it.
In a lot of areas, it'll probably help Canada, but in more, it will probably hurt. I think the country that'll benefit the most from it will be the United States.
I really can't say for sure. It's hard to tell right now. The Prime Minister all seems to think it's going to help, but we'll see. Time will tell.
Okay, for once we have two guests on our show that basically agree with each other on an issue. This is amazing. We really need your point of view for any kind of a discussion here. In terms of quality of life, how will NAFTA affect us on an individual basis as far as crossing the border, buying beer or other goods back and forth?
I don't think you're going to find that things are going to be immediately better for you or easier for you when you cross the border. There is some talk about making the whole process of paying your taxes and things like that at the border more efficient and easier to do. But it's NAFTA and free trade are not designed to facilitate cross-border shopping. I think what you're going to find is some items, there'll be no tariffs, additional tariffs that you'll have to pay when you cross the border. Things that are made in the States that you bring into Canada, you won't have to pay an additional tariff. If you're buying a Sony Walkman or something that was made in Japan and trying to bring that into Canada, the same tariffs and that are going to apply. Now, when I talk about tariffs, I'm not referring to taxes and sales taxes. Those are something that relate to the consumption of goods in the country and in the province. Right. And those will apply, and those are not affected by any of the free trade agreements. And the same thing would apply for a U.S. citizen buying something in Canada and going into the States. If there's sales taxes in the state in which they're living, they will be required to pay the sales taxes in those states. So, a lot of people are thinking that they can go across the border and buy anything they want and bring it back, without any duties, without any taxes, and that's not exactly what's being proposed under NAFTA and free trade. You will see some lowering of the taxes related to goods that are made or some lowering of tariffs on goods that are made in the States, but it's not going to affect your sales taxes, and they'll still be, you'll still have to pay those at the border when you come back into Canada.
Okay, it seems to me that some of the people that we interviewed thought this. When people think free trade, they think, okay, I can go across the border, I can get my groceries every week, and I can buy the kids' clothes, and there's going to be no hassles at the border.
And that's true as far as tariffs go. They won't be paying high tariffs or whatever when they come back across the border, but they certainly will be paying the taxes, just as if you buy something in Montreal and bring it down here, you should pay the New Brunswick sales tax. Something that you consume here. Generally, the agreements should lower the prices of manufactured items manufactured in North America that you buy and use here in your house, in your home.
Right.
These things should become cheaper. One danger that could happen with it and may happen with some of the agricultural products, is that in order for our agricultural industry to compete, we may have to lower our quality standards in which we sell it. Because in a lot of the things in the United States and particularly in Mexico, their quality levels are much less than they are here. But part of the expense of producing our goods here are the quality levels that we insist on. So there's all kinds of adjustment levels, and in the long run, generally in North America we should have better quality goods, but they should be at a cheaper price. And they should be similar throughout. But areas that can produce something cheaper than some other area will be the area that's producing them.
And they may not be as good a quality. So if I were to cross the border and buy a washer and dryer, for example?
No, I was thinking mostly of agricultural things, particularly milk. One reason our milk is so much more expensive is the quality that we insist on. Now,
and this would have to do with health standards.
If you're willing to accept milk that isn't tested for this, that, and the other thing, fine. We can do it cheaper. But I'm sure if you had the choice here as to whether to buy our milk or milk from somewhere else, that you would buy our milk, even if it was a little more expensive.
But that may create different levels of producer. And you may find that some producers will insist on a high quality of milk and sell their product at a premium. And other producers will produce a lesser quality product and sell that at a slightly lower price. And we have that in today's market, you know, for a lot of items. I mean, you can go in and buy, I don't know why, but jam seems to spring to mind. You can buy a $4 jar of jam. Or you can buy
an expensive jar of jam.
But there is jam on the market that sells for that, or you can buy it for less than $1. And it depends on the quality of the product. And if people are willing to pay more for a higher quality product, they will.
Okay, we have a call coming in. Go ahead, caller.
Yes, hello. I'm calling from Fredericton here. I just listened to your program, and I noticed several people who were interviewed making comments that initially NAFTA will be somewhat bad for Canada, and in the long run it will be good. I sort of thought if you first take the first free trade agreement we had between Canada and the United States, people were a lot more positive about it and enthusiastic, and you figure, well, we will see a lot more jobs, so this will give prosperity to Canada. And it didn't really happen for several reasons, in my view. And now we have NAFTA, which includes, of course, Mexico. And Mexico, people speak a different language. They have a different culture. So I think a lot of Canadians, or business people perhaps, more specific, they feel to some extent somewhat intimidated by dealing with perhaps a nation where the language is not the same. Myself, I do market promotion in Eastern Europe, Russia, and Ukraine on behalf of a Canadian export sector. And I see to some extent the same pictures for developing is when people don't speak the same language, or they don't know the customs or the way people do business, it becomes a deterrent. And then they may not, pursue certain market opportunities. And I guess that's perhaps some of what is perhaps going on with NAFTA today. So perhaps some of your people in the studio can comment on that.
Okay, thank you for calling.
I guess when you think about it, definitely there's language difference between Canada and Mexico, but it works both ways. Obviously, Mexico, they're not as fluent in English as we are, and that would make their ability to compete in Canada more difficult. I think there's been a lot of people scared about Mexico and afraid that the Canadian market's going to be flooded with a whole lot of inexpensive Mexican products, and Canada's not going to get the opportunity to compete in Mexico. And I don't really think that's going to happen. Canada has some advantages in a number of industries, which Mexico just does not have the know-how or the knowledge to compete in. Telecommunications is a good example of that. The environmental industries, Mexico is trying to improve their standards for the environment and make it a cleaner country. And Canada has a lot of excellent environmental companies which can export their expertise to Mexico and help Mexico improve their environment and their environmental standards. So I think that provides a great advantage for Canada, and it's already started. There are a number of companies that are making headways into Mexico because of NAFTA.
So did I just hear you say that one of the advantages to Canada would be to help Mexico improve environmental?
They're looking right now to improve their environmental standards. And
Canada is looking to improve Mexican environmental
No, the Mexican government is looking to improve the standards of that country, and they're going to need help doing that, and that's an excellent market for Canadian companies who have expertise in environmental issues and environmental consulting to go down to Mexico and help them out.
And what benefit would this be to Canada?
That provides a market for Canadian expertise and Canadian businesses to work in Mexico.
Okay, what's the minimum wage in Mexico? Are either one of you familiar with this?
No idea.
It's quite a lot lower than in...
One comment the gentleman made there was that people are much more positive about these agreements in the United States than they are in Canada, and they are. But then again, they're sitting there with the existing technology and the manufacturing capacity for them to move into our market with a particular item which they're already producing. They have much more manufacturing capability right there now. This is a tremendous advantage for them. Our difficulty is for the people in the same industry here is to be able to meet this challenge head on and stop the big fellow from coming across the border. This is no wonder he's positive down there. But wait until we start outselling them with our softwood, which they haven't got enough of. Then it's going to be on the other foot. You see, each area has its differences.
So you're saying that the United States are having direct advantages immediately to the free trade agreement while we are...
His comment was that they feel more positive about it, and
right.
I'm sure they do.
And of course, if they're benefiting from the free trade agreement immediately...
There's a different, I guess, psyche in the States than there is in Canada. Canada has a very long history of protectionism and protecting our sort of orphan industries and industries that wouldn't be competitive in a larger market and against the United States.
But why shouldn't we do this? I mean, it seems like we're abandoning...
Well, I don't think in the long run we're not going to have any choice. With the way the world is going right now, there's a global economy, and if we can't live within that global economy, Canada's going to end up being a third world country. And you know, the United States has had that point of view for a long time, and they've always looked to compete, and competition has been one of the cornerstones of their economy. And not all the businesses in the U.S. have looked upon the free trade agreement favorably, and as Gordon pointed out, softwood lumber has that industry is running scared, and they're scared of the free trade agreement because it's going to potentially hurt the industry in the States. And the Canadian industry in softwood has a much greater advantage, and you know, could cause trouble for the industry in the States. So that's one example where it's not going to be positive for the industry in the States, whereas Canada is going to benefit from that.
Okay, I've heard more examples of how it's not going to be positive for Canada than the States. Now, can you give me any more examples of? I mean, what would the disadvantages be to the U.S. of the North American Free Trade Agreement?
Disadvantages to the United States.
To the United States.
It should allow our resources to move into the United States at a much better
the
competitive position to producers in the United States. That's one. For example, our grain, which the United States has been protecting itself with all kinds of trade barriers. These are going to have to come down. I saw a figure the other day. I think it's 50 billion tons bigger market that we now have to sell into. Now, our only method now of competing is to compete head-to-head with no trade barriers and no subsidies. Now, if we can do that, then our wheat farmers out west will be going tremendously.
Okay, would some job losses be an acceptable trade-off for reduced prices? Here's what you had to say.
I really don't think so myself. I'd rather have people working and pay a little extra than I would have a lot cheaper products and people unemployed and taking money away in taxes and stuff like that.
I don't know how much it's going to reduce our prices. I don't think we'll see a drastic drop, and I also don't think that we'll lose that many jobs. I mean, if there are businesses that leave, then there'll also be businesses that come, I think. And if we're optimistic about it, then it's not gonna affect us that much.
people have a conception or a misconception that Canada is going to lose a tremendous amount of jobs. Well, one, we got to still remember that there's specialization, which will increase jobs in Canada as well. And if we were just going to lose jobs to lower paid labor, we'd have to look why Haiti isn't the industrialized capital of the world right now, because this would happen a long time ago. So I think as many jobs that are lost, they'll be created again. Other jobs will be created again.
Only if it's only a temporary loss. I think the idea of free trade was supposed to be that it would develop new kinds of jobs. So if in the long run it grows more jobs within Canada, then it would be a positive thing.
I don't think there would really be all that much job loss. I think it's a total restructuring.
In the state that the province and the country is in, we cannot afford to lose any more jobs because we have a complete generation of young people between 25 and 35 who may never work in their lives. So we need every last job we can keep our hands on.
Want now, because I mean, people could play lower prices, but that's not going to replace the jobs that they lose. I mean, I think the loss of jobs will probably be more of a loss than the benefit of having lower prices.
There will be a loss of jobs, I think. Now, is it mostly attributed to the free trade or because of new technologies? Because I look at new machinery being put into factories, which is going to cut jobs also. But we have to do that, otherwise we're not going to be able to compete. Because right now we're not competing against Canadians, we're competing against North Americans.
The unemployment rate in New Brunswick right now is so down so far that we need to bring it back up and worry about cross-border shopping later. The government has put so much on cross-border shopping right now and not enough on unemployment. Because I know I'm out of a job, so, and that's why I'm here actually. I'm waiting for an interview.
Okay, we have a call waiting. Go ahead, caller.
Yes, my question is for Mr. Simmons. Will NAFTA affect the future outlook for students pursuing jobs within Canada?
Who's the question for, caller?
Yes, Mr. Simmons.
There is no Mr. Simmons here. How? Are you still there, caller?
Well, I can maybe try and answer that question, although I'm not Mr. Simmons. I think we're going to be seeing a shift in the economy to more technologically advanced jobs, possibly more resource-based industries. And as a student, I think you should look at where in the economy is going to be growing in the future and where the potential jobs might be. And a student starting out now that has maybe 4 or 5 years in university or that, they're going to be coming into the workforce just as a lot of the effects of the free trade and NAFTA are going to be implemented and take effect. So you should be looking at where the economy is going to be growing and where the potential jobs are, and plan your education to make sure you have the skills to meet those needs. And if you can do that, you might be first off the mark and be able to get take advantage of some of the new jobs that are opening up.
How are they going to afford to put themselves through university in the meantime?
Believe it or not, Canada has one of the best programs for higher education in the world. And although tuitions are very expensive for an individual, the programs available and the government funding of universities is excellent in Canada. And we have immense advantages over the United States, where students have to pay the full cost of their education. And that's not the case in Canada. So, sorry.
I was going to say the difficulty I see this fellow in is he has no job or doesn't know what job to train for or what to go after. He looks out in the workforce with what he's got now, and there are no jobs or very few jobs. There are, as time goes on and we work into NAFTA, the industries that survive will be those that have survive on the basis of being able to compete through better productivity and better quality. And they do that by the level of the intelligence, the skill, the native ability of their workforce and the industry that they're in. And as they are able to compete that way, as they find they can compete in this market is gigantic. absolutely huge. I think there's as much purchasing power over here in the Boston area between the border and down around the Boston area as there is in all of Canada, to give you just an idea.
Is that not frightening? I mean, it seems like an advantage in one way. It seems
It is a
positive,
tremendous advantage,
it
providing you
reminds
can
me
compete.
of the big elephant being the American and the little chickens being the Canadian.
We have some tremendous advantages in Canada that we can take advantage of, and you know, I think we will, and I think it'll happen as NAFTA and the Free Trade Agreement are implemented and the effects take hold. It'll just happen automatically. There was an important point I think made by one of the people who's interviewed on the tape, was that you know, why are some of the jobs being lost? Is it because of free trade, or is it because of technological change? And I think what you're going to find is a lot of these jobs would have changed anyway, because technology is changing and because different sectors of the economy are improving and others are sort of waning, that these jobs would have been transferred or lost or shifted to new industries anyway. All that the Free Trade Agreement and NAFTA have done is possibly speed up that process.
Okay, where can people go to find out more about free trade, specifically NAFTA, Mr. Wilden?
More about free trade?
About free trade or NAFTA more specifically.
To the government. Right now the government has all kinds of publications and bulletins and broadsides and summaries. Also to the Chamber of Commerce. Just before we came in, he was showing me a news bulletin on NAFTA and GATT, which was very good.
The Canadian Chamber of Commerce has been very supportive of the Free Trade Agreement and NAFTA because of the advantages it's going to have for Canadian business.
Right. So now, because you support NAFTA, are people going to get all the answers on free trade, or are they going to get the positive side of the story when they go to find out about free trade?
I think they're going to get both sides of the story. I mean, I think the business community supports NAFTA because we see that the advantages that it's going to have for business in the long run. But we realize there are going to be some areas that are going to be hurt and are going to face a major change in the way they do business. And
okay, thank you for joining us. We've run out of time. Thank you for tuning in once again to Point of View, and join us in 2 weeks' time for another edition. Thank you and good night.
The New Brunswick Community Television Archive, exploring New Brunswick's history of community television programming, is an educational initiative of CHCO-TV.